Good morning, everybody. It's Penn Vicarage, and it's Friday all day, and nice to see you, and thank you for joining us for our Bible talk for today. May I remind you this weekend, both in Penn and in Tamworth, we've got some wonderful services. You'd be very, very welcome to join us. It's Harvest Festival in Tamworth. Anyway, wherever you are, we'd love to see you, and we'd be a better church with you in it. Friends, today we finish the Gospel of John. Next week, we move on to the only book about, I think we've now nearly finished the whole New Testament. We have just got to do the book of letter reports of Colossians, a book I don't know all that well, but I'm looking forward to getting to know that next week, and the book of Philemon. And then we finish the whole New Testament over, taking about 2.5 years to get there. For a few weeks after that, we're going to have a look at a few Psalms. So that starts the week after next. So finish John today. Colossians and Philemon next week, and then the week after, a bit after that, we'll be doing Psalms for a few weeks. Looking forward to that as well. So anyway, today, the last half chapter, the second half of John's Gospel, chapter 21. May I remind you of the scene? It's the resurrected Jesus. It's a few days after the resurrection, and the disciples have gone back to Galilee, and they've been fishing, and Jesus has cooked them breakfast on the edge of after having got a miraculous catch of fish for them. So here we go, John's Gospel, chapter 21, verses 15 to the end of the Gospel. When they'd finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend to my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him a third time, "Do you love me?" But he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your arms, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. He was the one who'd reclined next to Jesus at the supper and had said, "Lord, who is it that's going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus said to him, "If it's my will that he remain until I come, what's that to you? Follow me." So the rumour spread in the community that the disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him he wouldn't die, but if it's my will that he remain until I come, what's that to you? This is the disciple who's testifying to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. But there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that the whole world could not contain the books that would be written. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Right, I said at the beginning, it's the end of the gospel. It isn't. The gospel continues today. It's very important to register that. But in our reading for this morning, I suppose really three things to say, really. Firstly, about the resurrection and about people's response to the resurrection. The fact that Jesus is risen from the dead was both good news and bad news for the people around. For Jesus' friends, of course, it was good news. The people that Jesus had helped, it was good news. For the religious leaders, of course, it would be massively unsettling. You know, that the idea that God might have sent his son into the world, his great Messiah, and they put him on a cross would be, the idea of that is just utterly horrific. But even to the disciples, actually, it's a bit of a mixed thing as well. And I think it's worth reflecting sometimes what the idea of the resurrected Jesus means. I mean, so for example, with St. Paul had been persecuting Christians, as Saul had been devoutly Jewish and so on. And the idea that Jesus is resurrected meant that he had to completely rethink the way he did things. So the idea that Jesus is resurrected, that Jesus is alive again, that Jesus has been brought back from the dead by God, actually has some pretty big ramifications for people. And as I say, for some people it's bad news, and for other people it's good news. But I think what's interesting here is Simon Peter. You have to remember that Peter had been the rock on which Jesus was going to build his church. He'd been you know, the top disciple, if you like. You know, he'd been there from the beginning. He was great character, one we all love because he keeps putting his feet in it, and both feet. And yet, this rock on which he's going to build his church, who swore that he would never leave Jesus, who'd go with Jesus at the end, before the night was over, before the cock crew, he had denied even that he knew Jesus. He hadn't done it once, he'd done it 3 times. In other words, at Jesus' hour of greatest need, he had denied even knowing him. And I suppose, therefore, the idea of Jesus being alive is, of course, very wonderful for Peter, because his friend who was dead is now alive, and so on. On the other hand, the fact that he's alive means he's got to face up to the fact that actually he let Jesus down at his hour of greatest need. So you can imagine Peter having this encounter with Jesus, and Peter's this like, you know, the elephant in the room. And then Jesus says to Peter, Simon, and you can almost imagine Peter thinking, yes, Lord. But what is interesting is that Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? And each time Peter has the opportunity to say, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Twice it's the word agape, and once it's the word philia. So it's different words for love, both friendship love and also God's long-lasting love as well. But Peter is given the opportunity by Jesus 3 times to affirm the fact that he loves him. So whereas Peter had denied Jesus 3 times, actually Jesus gives Peter the opportunity to affirm that he loves him 3 times. And it's an amazing way in which Peter is forgiven by Jesus, and Jesus demonstrates that Peter is forgiven. And that whatever he'd done, Peter, the unfailing, the amazing love of Jesus is enough for Peter to be forgiven. And the incredible thing is, of course, that in the face of the resurrected Jesus, we can be completely ourselves, because we can only be ourselves. But we can be ourselves safely because we know we are unconditionally loved. So here, the resurrected Jesus makes Peter face up to what's happened, and Jesus forgives him and gives him life again. And I suppose it tells us that whatever we've done, however we've let Jesus down in our lives or whatever, we can be ourselves, and whatever we've done in Jesus, there's always a way back. So we can be like Peter. The other thing is this bizarre little, that's the first thing, is about the Peter's forgiveness. The other thing I want to say is there's this a bizarre conversation in the last few verses about what's going to happen to the disciple whom Jesus loved. John, of course, is referring to himself there. And Peter asks, what's going to happen to him? And rumour starts to circulate that he's not going to die, and so on and so on and so on. But I think Jesus' response when asked what about him is very interesting. Jesus' response is quite blunt. What is that to you? You follow me. And I think sometimes, often in church life, like anywhere, we can be subject to jealousy. We can look at other people who seem to have, seem to get out of the pecking order more than we do, and all this type of stuff. And it's easy to look, we spend a lot too much time looking sideways, actually, when we should be looking upwards. And sometimes we can look at other people and sometimes we despair because, we think we deserve better, and jealousies can kick in for all of us. Of course they can, because the Christian church is full of fallible human beings like you and I. Don't we all feel it sometimes? And there's a jealousy going on here, even in the face of the resurrected Jesus, but Jesus is responsive for anything. What is that to you? Come and follow me. I can remember years ago, as a new vicar, watching somebody I'd been at college with who I didn't really rate, being given the opportunity to train a curate very early on, because I was never given anything like that for years. And I remember moaning about it to my friends, and one of my friends said to me, in the words of Jesus, what is that to you? Follow me. And I've trained 4 curates since then, so it's all right. So it's okay, isn't it? But actually, I think there's something very important here, that we should keep our eyes on Jesus, that we should focus, and I'm saying this to myself as much as anyone, that we should say to ourselves sometimes when we think about other people, what is that to you? Follow me. And we have to keep our eyes on Jesus. So, 2 things from this again, incredible encounter. And like I said, with these readings, feel them with your heart as well as your head. Imagine how Peter must have felt having to face up to what he'd done in the sight of in the presence of the risen Jesus. But so have we, but so can we, because we can be forgiven, because Jesus loves us unconditionally. But secondly, let's, instead of spending so much time often looking at others and comparing ourselves with others, let's ask ourselves sometimes, what is that to you? Jesus says, come, follow me. God bless you, my friends. Have a lovely weekend, and we're looking at Colossians on Monday. Wonderful book. Looking forward to it. God bless you. As I say, have a